Me, it's Lorenzo with the Planting Flag Space Program. The ship is still en route to Duna, and the textures are back. So we no longer have a black shadow of the night. We now have an actual functioning spacecraft. Bringing up the UI, we are at half fuel for these. These tanks are still full. I reckon it's this one that's about depleted. So we have plenty of fuel left in the nuclear rockets. We have the two landers, one for Ike and one for Duna, and in an emergency the capsule can try a parachute only landing. So that's what we're going to attempt. If we look at our trajectory here in the map view, we're still fairly close to Kerbin. The blue one is our trajectory right now. Here we have the encounter with Duna at a sizable distance of 15,500 kilometers. So we're probably just grazing the edge of that sphere of influence. Going to time warp forward to about the halfway point and try to do a correction maneuver to get that in a little bit closer. And then once there, we will try an aero braking maneuver in the atmosphere of Duna. Then first take a lander to Ike, and afterwards Duna itself. As you can see, the transfer time is rather long. The time is ticking over up at about a day a second, a little bit slower I think, and you can see the transfer is taking a few months at this rate. We're about halfway there now. I reckon we have 40 more days to travel, so this was not quite the speediest transfer possible, but here is where we are going to attempt our correction maneuver. So we're just going to add the maneuver node, and I'm going to gently tug on these markers until our until the projected periapsis around Duna is going to be a little bit lower. So here we have this is hard to see. Let's see how to do this properly. So we have 15,500 here. We're going to just start by slightly reducing the speed. Now we have two of them here. Now we have to distinguish between the old one and the new, which is impossible. Great. So, seeing as how to have enough fuel anyway, I'm just going to do small burns without, this is how we used to do it without the maneuver system. I'm going to point prograde, look here at the nav ball, and I'm going to just give it a little bit of rocket thrust and see what happens to this periapsis. It's increasing, this is wrong. Immediately cut the thrust again. I'm going to turn the ship around and then apply a little bit of thrust that way. Being that we are in interplanetary space, the tiniest amount of thrust, we need less than a meter per second probably, will shave huge amounts of this distance. This is really the fine-tuning of a trajectory. And because our ship is still quite heavy and the nuclear rockets put out a relatively low amount of thrust, with a low throttle setting we can really fine-tune this. So we're pointing retrograde now, just a dab of throttle. Now the periapsis is reducing. I'm going to keep thrusting in this direction until it starts rising again, and then try a different direction. You can see this is a very professional way of doing rocket science, but it's a way you too can master. You just point your ship in a direction and try and see if it goes the right way. We are now at 11,000 kilometers, 11.5, and still going down. Not as fast as I would like. Let's increase the thrust a bit. No, it's going back up again. So we need a different vector. So I'm just going to turn halfway into this direction here on the nav ball and see if we can make it work. The thing is, we need a tiny adjustment. No, this is wrong, so I'm going to turn 180 degrees around. And I'm sure you can calculate this, or you can use the maneuver planning system, but the two icons, they just spawn too close to each other. I cannot get my mouse to display the new end of the current and the projected apo and periapsis. So I'm just going to try doing it the old-fashioned way by trying and seeing what the computer makes of it. To make a little bit of thrust this way, and we're at 9,000 kilometers now. Hey, this is going rapidly. This was apparently the jackpot direction to go in. We're at 5,000 now, 4,000, 3,000, less thrust. and we're at 1,500 kilometers now. You can see it wobbling a bit. This is because the ship is rotating, and this even a rotation, the centimeters per second difference in speed makes hundreds of meters or even tens of kilometers difference in this point. This is how sensitive these interplanetary trajectories are. You can see our speed, it barely changed, our fuel hardly changed, we only used a tiny amount of fuel, and still we are going to end up about 15,000 kilometers closer to Duna. So what I'm going to do now, this will have sufficed as our first correction burn. Going to time warp, accelerate time again until we're a bit closer still. And the later you do these burns, the more fuel they cost, but they're also more accurate. This prediction will change a little bit due to uncertainty in the calculation, at least they would in real life. You can see we are now a fair amount closer to Duna than we are to Kerbin. We are really changing planets here. So that's going well, and I think this is the time to do the second correction burn to put us really on the approach course to the planet itself. Can we see it yet? I don't think we would be able to see it yet, but we're going to have a look for it anyway. Where is Duna in the sky here? No. Can't see it. It's too far off. I'm going to try it again with the maneuver nodes. This is a system that should work. Let's see. This one doesn't even have an encounter anymore. No. Wait. So here we can see the two of them side by side. This is wrong, so we need to go the other way. No, I'm just going to do it in the old-fashioned way again. Just pointing the ship in a direction and burning a little bit. So the direction we're pointing in now happens to be a nice one. We're at 600 kilometers now, 500, 400, 300, 200, 250. So we're going to change direction again. Just sort of randomly. And now it's increasing, so change it again. Basically what we're doing is changing the angle at which we are going to enter Duna's sphere of influence ever so slightly. Make it just so that we go very low to the planet. We're projected to now hit the planet at about 50 to 60 kilometers in altitude. This is good enough for me. And when we're really close to the planet, when we're actually in its sphere of influence, we will make a burn that will put us on an exact desired altitude. I'm thinking about 20 kilometers for a nice aero brake. This is always a little bit hairy to decide what's going on. The ship is tumbling due to all our steering and maneuvering. For now, this is not a problem yet. I'm going to time warp more until we are actually at Duna. Now, while we travel there, in other news, KSP, this is the game you're watching, Kerbal Space Program, the version 0.21 has just been released, and this adds many features that work towards career mode. I had mistakenly believed that career mode would be in this update, so I was already prepped to make a video series of me trying the career mode, but that was sadly not in the game. It does have some nicer textures for Kerbin and the moon, some better craters and everything. A better guidance system and astronaut management, so you can hire your astronauts, and if they die they will get a little memorial. So after this mission to Duna and Ike, I will of course be switching to the new version of Kerbal Space Program 0.21, and I might do a quick first look video as well. Look, here we're going to enter the Duna sphere of influence in about 22 hours. Can we see it already? Can we see Duna? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Cannot see it yet. Oh, there we are. There we are. Don't time warp too far. Look, here is Duna. And as you can see, as you might see, our current course does not have a periapsis. This means it is going to crash through the planet. That is, of course, not ideal. We want our ship to brake using Duna. Ah, there it is. We want our ship to brake using Duna, but we don't want to. We don't want to brake by crashing into rocks. We want to brake by crashing into atmosphere. So, going to burn perpendicular to the horizon and add on a little bit of speed until we are going to just miss the planet. Let's see, is this starting to have a periapsis yet? Please, please, please. There we go. We are now scheduled, or well, slated to hit the planet, and we're coming in at a little bit of an odd angle, so we might get a polar orbit or something like that, a little bit of a weird orbit. We don't really care about that at this point. We just want to get in orbit around the planet. 22 kilometers is good enough for me. I'm going to go for 25, 26. Duna has a very thin atmosphere, so that should probably be good enough to give us a nice amount of braking without slowing us down completely. Obviously we do want to end up in orbit and not actually landing quite yet. We want to land with our lander, not with the whole ship we have here. So to see how that goes, I'm going to increase the time warp once again. We are going to meet Duna in 8 hours, but in accelerated time, of course, that is a whole lot less. Now, this has happened quite a few times already in our own space program, although never with humans on board. Lots of automated rovers and probes have landed on Duna, on Mars of course, and always they first hit the atmosphere to slow down, and then they either use parachutes, a big airbag system, or they land on rockets. So this first bit here where we gently skim, well gently, it's probably not going to be gently, where we skim through the atmosphere losing speed, and remember we're actually catching up. So in the solar system view of things, we are the slow guys and the planet is going to catch us up to its speed, but we like to see things in our perspective of course, and we are just falling down into a planet. And we are here now at 200 kilometers. I think it is time to cut out the time warp. The game is deciding that we are coming in for landing by changing the camera view, and I'm going to come well, let's angle the point of the ship into the atmosphere. Heating effects are only modeled visually so far, but it's always good to pretend. Let's pretend that this parachute is our heat shield. These landers are not in an ideal configuration for aero braking. They would probably be sheared off in a real life scenario. Fortunately, we are not in a real life scenario. Look at that. So here we are over Duna. Going to accelerate once more, see if we can hit this atmosphere. This is the good thing about nuclear rockets as well. Well, not in this scenario, not really, but nuclear rockets, they use gas and they pass it over their reactor core to heat it up and inject it as rocket fuel. Now as long as you have an atmosphere somewhere, you can use that gas to power your nuclear rocket, well, to provide reaction mass for it. And if you were to use these in real life, you could, this means you can refuel without having to dig up rocks, grind them up and crush them into rocket fuel. You can just use the atmosphere. This is one of the bonuses of, well, one of the benefits of using nuclear propulsion. And as you can see now, there's nothing more we can really do about this. We are going to see how much the atmosphere is going to slow us down, if at all, and then turn around and slow down using our rockets to establish in orbit around Duna. So we have hit the atmosphere. It starts at about 42 kilometers. I think it will be very thin here, but we are now at 35 kilometers of altitude above Duna, going at a relative speed of 1600 meters per second. You might notice that this speed is very much lower than the orbital speed required for Kerbin. This is because Duna is a smaller planet, and as you recall, orbiting is moving fast enough around the planet so that its surface curves away under you faster than you are attracted towards it. Now Duna is smaller, this means the surface curves faster, and it's also lighter, which means the gravity pulls at you less strongly. All these factors combine into making the orbital speed required a lot lower. Additionally, we are coming in at interplanetary transfer speed, which is quite high relative to this. We are exceeding the orbital speed quite a lot. I think if we were going at 800-900 meters per second here, we would very well be able to do orbit. But we're going almost twice that, and we are hoping the atmosphere is going to slow us down. We're almost at the lowest point of 26 kilometers. The atmosphere is not slowing us down significantly. This means that I should have dropped a fair bit lower. We are not going to grab a big amount of aero braking. We are already rising in altitude again, and our trajectory has barely changed. So we're going to turn around and fire the rockets instead. We cannot wait for another pass, because as you can see in the trajectory, it is if we just do nothing, we are going to shoot right out of the system again. So we have to use our rockets here. I'm going to light them immediately, and they will help us slow down, hopefully. But we're almost in a vacuum. This atmosphere is really thin. On Kerbin, at this altitude, these rockets would not work as well, but here they are doing a fine job indeed. They still have quite a bit of speed to scrub, so they have some burnings to do. But I'm confident we will end up in orbit around Duna in this fashion. And what I'm going to do is make this orbit in such a way that it will intercept Ike, or at least will intercept the orbit of Ike. Because I want to go to Ike first, and then with the remaining lander go to Duna. No, screw that, we're around Duna now. We're going to do Ike first. This is how missions are planned. You just decide last minute where you want to go and who you want to send there. It always works out for the best, trust me. So you can see the trajectory is curving inwards slowly, and as we reduce more and more, as we slow down more and more, it's going to curve inward until we're no longer going to escape Duna, and it will become a closed ellipse, hence an orbit. Or in other words, an orbit. So not much longer now. I think we're back up at 45 kilometers, so well in space again, and here is our orbit. Now we have an apoapsis, which is very high, of 24,000 meters, 24,000 kilometers, so we're going to reduce that a little bit further to around the distance that Ike is. So Ike is orbiting at almost 3,000 kilometers, so we want our highest point to be 3,000 kilometers. Why not? So here we go, 3,300 kilometers. You can see it's in the wrong plane, completely wrong. We will do something about that later. We will set Ike as the target, and unfortunately I can tell you already this is going to be an expensive correction burn, because we need to let's see, but we can do it almost immediately. That's nice. We want to align our orbit with Ike's, otherwise we're not going to meet it. So you plan a maneuver node on the ascending node. This is when you set the target. You get these dotted lines. This is where the planes cross, and then you move it like this. And here we have an orbit that is at least a little bit on Ike's plane, and we're going to reduce the speed of it as well. So this dotted line is the orbit we want, approximately. A little slower, something like that. Yes, great. So we want this orbit, and it's 600 more meters per second. This is almost twice the amount that we use to even slow down around Duna. So had we fine-tuned our injection, our capture move a little bit more, we could have saved a whopping 600 meters per second by doing these corrections that are now kind of guessed in interplanetary space. By doing them with reason and thinking, we could have saved 600 meters per second of delta V. Now we have to basically pay for the sloppiness of those correction burns by brute forcing it here while close to the planet. Obviously that's not the best way to do it. Fortunately we have nuclear rockets, a lot of fuel, and Kerbals that don't really want to go home, so we can just go ahead and do it. This burn here is probably going to be the singular reason why none of these guys will be returning home. This delta V was almost enough to go back to Kerbin. Then you need about 1,000 for that, to break orbit around Duna again, and then basically slow down in solar orbit, where you can get back to Kerbin in the same way we got here. But now we're going to use it instead to slightly alter our orbit here in the Duna Ike system, because we want to have flags on both of these celestial bodies. So 400 more meters per second of delta V remaining, and as soon as that happens we can start fine-tuning our Ike interception. Ike is the moon of Duna. It doesn't really have a real-life analog. Mars in our world has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. They are very small rocks that orbit very close to Mars and are really small. If you stood on Phobos or Deimos, you could basically jump into escape velocity for that moon. So Ike is a little bit bigger, but it's a lot smaller than the moon or the Luna analog around Kerbin. But it has no atmosphere, so landing on it is a little bit hairy. You cannot use parachutes, and I hope these small landers I brought along, that they will have enough engines to actually achieve that landing. What I'm going to do, I just decided, I'm going to catch up with Ike, while the main ship will not establish orbit around Ike, but when it's close it will detach one of these landers, and that will go on to orbit Ike and land on it. Meanwhile, this one will return to Duna, and it will then be unbalanced, so it won't be able to do very strong burns, because it can only, if it does so, it will flip over because one of the landers is missing. So it will try and do an arrow capture in Duna, or at least an arrow braking maneuver, so that the orbit becomes smaller, and then it will detach and land on Duna itself. Then, oh shit, I have talked over the finishing point of my burn, so now it's too long. And it's still crooked. So, I'm going to try another one. See here if we can catch up to that bloody moon. So if we do this burn, 48 meters per second, yes, I can afford that. The planes will be perfectly aligned, and then we can just basically time warp until we meet it. Another thing you really don't want to do in your actual real life honest to God space program is have your mission mandate consist of waiting until we hit something after firing your rocket. I mean, there's a lot of waiting for transfer windows in real life. Of course, the window to fly to Mars in the most energy efficient way only happens every slightly under 2 years. But if you launch a rocket and then you're just basically in an orbit that doesn't meet anything, and you go like, well, we'll wait for it until the moon does get close or whatever, you're obviously going to run out of air and water and food and happiness and joy for the astronauts. Kerbals don't need any of these things. They are very happy to wait, and we can just accelerate time, so that makes everything very, very easy indeed. I don't know what's up, but my rocket is spinning out of control. Please return here to the blue marker. And as I have done many a time yet, I'm going to time warp to our planned maneuver node. 5 more minutes. 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, full thrust on the nuclear rockets. Their fuel supply is now almost exhausted, or it's at a quarter amount of the fuel. And this will carry the spacecraft a surprising amount, because now it's obviously a lot lighter than it was before. So it will go not twice as far, but almost twice as far as it did before. So now we're in an orbit that could meet up with Ike. It's just not going to this time around. So as I said, I'm going to accelerate time until it does. So we have to lower the time acceleration because we're passing close to Duna. Well, if it doesn't sync up on the next go, I'm going to drop a lander down on Duna. There are some flags to be planted. There's flags to be planted, damn it. So let's see. No. This does not meet up with Ike. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to detach the lander here at the high point. And then the lander engines, they only need a tiny amount of fuel to dip this periapsis into the atmosphere, so then the atmosphere will catch it. So, is it going to be Franklin, Johns, or Durfrod? It's going to be Durfrod. He is going to walk into the lander, turning on his helmet light. Yes, helmet light, there he is. First he has to spacewalk into the capsule, of course. And then as soon as he does so, it is going to detach. Where is that entry hatch? It's of course always on the other side. Don't knock off the landing gear, you are needing it later. This is a design flaw. We have obscured the landing hatch. Well, the entry hatch. Well, if he cannot get to it, he can get to it. We would have to eject the ship before. Right. So here we are. Well, which one did he go into? Now I don't know anymore. Command pod. Yes. This one has the crew, so it's going to detach. decouple the node, and there it goes. Switch the ship to that one, and here is brave Durfrod going off in his lander. Checking out the engines. Do they work? Not yet. He has to press the on switch. So, pressing the on switch, please. Engines are firing and working properly. So, getting some distance from the main ship, which is now home for Durfrod. He's been in there for about 3 months, and now all he's got to do is turn around and slow himself down and prepare himself for landing. He's got a basic ship. It's got 3 parachutes on the tanks and also 3 landing legs. 6 tiny engines, which should help cushion the descent. So, firing a retrograde and making a rocket burn, passing by his friends rather more speedily than last time, and we are going to see... Oh, this might be a design flaw. If the engines, when fired, induce a terrible roll, it will make landing rather difficult. Anyway, we will see how that goes on Ike. Fortunately, on Duna we can depend on atmospheric. This is rather a too steep approach. We need more atmosphere time. This is just going to crash him straight into the ground. Fortunately, Duna does not have oceans or anything. We can just land anywhere. So we need to undo a little bit of that burn because we want to go through the atmosphere for a while. So let's look at that a little bit more. We want a periapsis because no, not that high. We want to put the periapsis at like 1 kilometer. That way it will come in rather shallow and it will cut through as much atmosphere as possible before hitting the ground, which will make it easy for the rockets and the parachutes to slow it down enough. So periapsis of 2 kilometers. This is ideal for landing, and this ship definitely has the flaw that I decided upon, that I recognized, that I decided upon. Why does it do that? Why does it spin when I fire the engines? Are they... Oh, they're not on the same height. They induce a spin. I hope the pod torque can cancel that spin, but that will make landing on Ike very, very difficult indeed. But we're not worried about that yet. First up is a time warp to... Ooh, this looks weird. Anyway, first up is a time warp, so we can get nice and close to Duna. Let's have a look at this landing. Durfrod is rather nervous, but I am confident Duna is going to receive a flag in the very, very near future. So, at 100 kilometers now, reducing the time, we're back to 0, and we are going in rather fast. We're at 1100 meters per second, which is not as fast as we came in from interplanetary distances, but still rather fast. This rocket will have a lot of fuel remaining when landing, because it will land mostly using parachutes. Will it be enough to get back into orbit? I don't know. If it is, he can of course go back into orbit and chill aboard the big ship. If the big ship with the 3 Kerbals will remain in orbit, I might send a rescue vehicle. No, I will not, because the next mission will be in point 21 and none of this will have happened in that version. So, impatient as always, proceeding down to the surface, and we're about to hit, yeah, we've just hit the atmosphere. It's 41 kilometers up. And I'm not going to deploy the parachutes just yet. We are at hypersonic speeds now, at over 1 kilometer per second. In the game they probably would be fine, but in real life you cannot deploy your parachutes when you're going that fast. You need a heat shield that will take most of the brunt of the deceleration, the energy that's going into the spacecraft from the planet. Or if you want to look at it from the spacecraft's perspective, the kinetic energy of the spacecraft that's being bled off in the atmosphere. Still, I like it better to think of the planets as a big soft cushion that is just whacking you while it's moving along and taking you with it at its speed, because that's essentially what's going to happen. And as we drop down, we will probably lose sight of the stars, because the atmosphere, while it is thin, is thick enough to have a lighting effect. You can see it on the horizon coming up there. And we are still moving very fast, 1260 meters per second, still accelerating, because we are in essence now falling. And we haven't hit any thick part of the atmosphere yet. Here we are at a lousy 20 kilometers of altitude. We can see, even though the planet is very small, the horizon is starting to recede from us, which just means that we are going down rather quickly. The vertical speed indicator is very high in the red. And if we look from the internal perspective, here's the window. If we rotate the ship around, this must look very scary for poor old Durfrod. Durfrod was his name, Durfrod. I forgot how to go to the external cam. Yeah, it's C, great. We're at 10 kilometers now, still going at almost a kilometer a second. We are finally starting to decelerate. You can see if you are going for an aero braking move on Duna, you have to do it really low. I would say about 10 kilometers, and you still have a good shot of getting back up into the atmosphere again. Passing over the ground fairly quickly, and at this rate we are going to smash into it before we reach a decent and safe speed. We are now decelerating at almost 2 Gs, which is quite a lot, and you can see the stars have gone. We now have a black sky and a sort of white horizon. 6 kilometers up, slowing down quite rapidly, up to about 3 Gs, but you can see how close, just how close the ground is. So I'm going to fire rocket engines as well, slow us down even more. We do get the spin from that, but that's actually fine. So we're at 300 meters per second now, 200. As soon as we reach 100, I can cut engines and do the parachutes. So at 100, deploy the parachutes, and we are now actually descending fairly well. I deem this an easy, successful descent. And if we deployed the parachutes too soon, they would not have been able to slow us down. Well, maybe they would have. Look at Durford, he is just ecstatic. We are falling down now at a safe 17 meters per second, and I'm going to fire the rockets anyway to reduce that even further. So 7 meters per second touchdown speed, that should be decent. 4, 3, 2, 3, cut the engines, yes, cut the engines. A little bounce, the parachutes are gone, and Durfrod is on the surface of Duna. Now, first order of business is, of course, he has half a tank of fuel remaining in these. No, he has almost he has 3 small fuel tanks remaining. We can try and get him back into orbit, but I'm not confident it would work. So he can go out now. Let go, drop down to the surface, please. And oh, what he can do, he can repack the parachutes, try and make it into orbit, and if he does not, he can try and attempt a pure parachute descent, and then we can also see if that would have worked. So plant your flag and then go back and do that, Durfrod. That sounds cool. Sounds cool, doesn't it? So we have the flag on Duna. That's done. Yes. DunaMax. Ooh. DunaMax forever. Great flag, great people. Great flag, great people. This is a space program for literates, as you can tell. Look, low gravity here on Duna. Not as low as the moon, but still very low. And hope he can just about make it up with his jetpack. So we didn't need a ladder, but any more gravity and he would not have been able to get back into his command pod. Oh dear. Get back up, Durfrod. Durfrod, Durfrod, Durfrod. Ooh. Grab it and enter it. So now, oh no. Almost forgot to repack the parachutes, and that then it would have meant certain doom for Durfrod in the case he is not able to reach orbit again with these tiny rockets and his low allowance of fuel. So get him on top of these cylinders. Ah, come on. Go for it. Repack chute, great. Nothing like some spacecraft maintenance so you can get home again. And of course, if he makes it home, if he makes it home being his big spacecraft, this is good because then they will have a tiny bit of fuel extra to go somewhere else with. Oh, go on. And now the moment of truth, we are going to leave the flag behind. DunaMax forever. And here we go, we have liftoff. Duna having such a low gravity compared to Kirby means it... Ooh, I forgot about the spin maneuver. This is going to make any decent orbit really difficult. So I'm going to reduce throttle, like we do on a Kerbin ascent. We basically want a little bit of altitude, and then start going sideways. Can I cancel out this spin with my pod? No. This is a really shoddy lander. We are almost going fast enough for orbit though. That's great, and we're almost high enough to be out of this stupid atmosphere. So I'm just going to go horizontal now. I'm going to cut the engines for a bit and see what our trajectory is doing now. We have an apoapsis of 90 kilometers already. Jesus, you need a low amount of fuel to get off Duna. This is ridiculous. He's going to add a maneuver. That will get him well into orbit. We need 400 more meters per second of delta V. I think it's in the cans for this Durfrod. He can be rescued, and I'm not sure if I'm going to actually pick him up on this mission, but it is a distinct possibility. This also means that the Icelander probably will be able to take off as well, even though he cannot use parachutes to slow his initial descent. So he will need more rocket power to do that. So that's a bit of a pickle. We will see how that goes, but first we will get this guy into orbit, and then that will conclude the video for today. Here is our flag spot on Duna. It is now well and truly ours. And we're going to, as always, time warp forwards to this burn point. 3 more minutes, and fortunately we can time warp. So we don't really care about what kind of orbit this will be, so here we go with the engines. Burn that, and we get a good 4 Gs on this tiny lander, never designed to go back into orbit, but doing an admirable job at it anyway. Spinning about and about and about. And here we are, safely back in Duna orbit. Isn't that amazing? Oh, well, not quite safely yet. We are still at atmospheric altitudes here on the periapsis, but that will be fixed post-haste by a tiny burn at our new apoapsis. So, while Durfrod is going back into orbit, the next video will be along in a few days, just as always on the Monday, Wednesday and Friday schedule. If you like these videos, the best way to help me is to actually click that like button, leave a nice comment, or of course subscribe. I always like seeing new people subscribe to the channel, and please say hi when you do, because it's nice to know people. And if you have tips, comments, hints or tricks, or things you'd like me to try, you are most welcome to share them. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and I will be seeing you guys next time. And Durfrod is a very surprisingly happy man. He left the flag on Duna and got back into orbit like the spaceman he is. So, this was Lorenzo, and I will be seeing you guys next time. Goodbye.